Chapter 4 AC. Bob was still being moody and not talking to you as he limped his way to your car and did his jump/blur thing up to the passenger seat after you opened the door for him, and then the narrow dashboard. You noticed he could only do the dash thing a few feet at a time, and probably not through solid obstacles. He sat on the dashboard hunched forward with his bad leg held out and his good leg bent to his chest. He kept his arms crossed over his good knee, chin resting on it and glaring through the windshield. You really didn't think it was safe for him to ride up there, but what other option was there? He was way too small to buckle into the passenger seat. As you drove, you saw his little red eyelights glance at you from the corners of his narrowed sockets now and again. He had quite the temper. And you didn't even do anything. All you had done was try to help him and be nice to him, even when he was being a jerk. Whatever. Keep acting up, Bob. Pity would only get him so far. You gripped the wheel but drove carefully, not taking sharp turns so he didn't slide off the dashboard, though it was really tempting. It was looking to be another hot day, and your car AC wasn't the best. Man, if only you could crack the windows. But you were afraid the force of the wind would knock Bob over, or worse yet, he would fly out the window or something. But would that really be so terrible? Bitty problem solved. No, you wouldn't do that. You would just suffer the heat. Seemed Bob didn't even really notice the heat. You were sure the dashboard had to be hot, but he wasn't flinching or sweating or anything. Could he even sweat? Hadn't he sweated when he did the dash thing earlier and hurt his leg? The nearest Bitty store was an hour away. An hour's worth of Bob cutting you dirty looks and groaning at your music choice. Whatever, dubstep was amazing. You've got to be fucking kidding me, Bob groaned as you finally pulled into the shopping center and he read the Bitty storefront sign, Bountiful Bitty Boutique. You couldn't help it anymore. In all fairness, the store name was ridiculous, but his overly disgusted expression, he really was expressive for a tiny skeleton. And wow, still learning things about your little charge. Bob could read. He looked over and glared at you, but it was a weak glare, and you noticed the start of a grin fighting at the corners of his mouth. You done being mad at me now? You asked between laughter. Do you always ask stupid questions? He shot back. I said I was sorry. You leaned your head back, groaning, and rubbed your face with both hands. You say that a lot. He was staring at you curiously again. More silence. Well, at least he had stopped glaring at you, and you reminded yourself yet again to try to have patience with the little guy. Deep breaths and all that. You took a breath and sighed, unbuckling your seatbelt. Well, can we at least go in and get you your clothes? I guess. But I'm not actually going to ride around in a fanny pack. Good, because I didn't bring it. And maybe being on the ground is a bad idea after all. Yeah, I agree. Guess you're stuck riding around on my shoulder. Sucks to be you, you smirked, holding out your hand to him. He stared at it, then looked back at you. I guess sucks to be me. Huh. He actually may have smiled a little, what looked to be a real smile. Tentatively, he reached out his hand and placed it on your pointer finger, looking up at you to gauge your reaction, like you might jerk your hand away. You smiled, encouragingly, you hoped. His tiny hand was really warm. Like, not warm enough to burn you, but definitely warmer than a cat or dog. Maybe like coffee after it has cooled off a little? Was that from sitting on the hot dashboard? When you didn't jerk your hand away, he carefully placed both hands on yours and hoisted himself up into your palm. Yeah, holding him was like holding a warm cup of coffee. You didn't notice him being overly warm when you held him in the towel the previous night. Definitely must be from sitting on the dashboard. It seemed it didn't take much to cheer Bob up. He was downright chipper as you all made your way into the Bitty store, humming some tune and clutching your hair and everything. He was actually kind of cute like this. Though thinking of him like a cute pet was wrong, wasn't it? Whatever. As you went through the automatic doors, two things hit you at once. One, the air conditioner. They really kept it cold in the store. Also, you were severely underdressed. Who would have thought people would show up so dressed up just to go to a pet clothing store? Gah, you didn't even care about fashion, but could tell most people in there were wearing expensive designer brands. and their biddies were similarly dressed very well. The mood started to sour a bit, as people with their biddies literally gawked at you and Bob. Ugh, you hated attention. Was it because of the mustard-stained tunic Bob was wearing? Or maybe it was your haphazard tank top and shorts combo? The bruises and scratches along your legs and arms from work? All of the above? And it was so surreal having not only humans stare you down, but those taller skeleton biddies. Poppies? With their glowing purple eyes, and baby blues with their glowing blue eyes, stare from their owner's shoulders as the two of you walked by. You could feel Bob tensing on your shoulder and sort of hunch into himself. People whispered as you passed. What the hell? Rude. You quickly ducked down the darker clothing aisle that was relatively empty, save for a woman and her baby blue biddy babbling incoherently but enthusiastically at its human as it sat on her shoulder. The woman just laughed and patted its head. It gave an alarmed squeak as it spotted you, and the woman looked over and gave you a wide-eyed look, too. Bob growled. The lady covered her biddy protectively and quickly scooted over to a different aisle. Well, that was one way to stop the staring. Not the nicest way, but effective nonetheless. Still, growling at people isn't nice, you whispered as you started scanning the clothes hung in plastic packaging. They were displayed along the wall like doll clothes displayed in toy stores. Yeah, well, they started it and it made them leave. Have you noticed the looks I'm getting? Maybe it's because of your fancy condiment-stained attire, which we're here to fix. No, I'm pretty sure that's not it, he grumbled. Whatever. Hey, look! They have long black coats, you pointed out, trying to lighten the mood again. Haha! I'll bet this is the kind of stuff you want to wear, right? Aw, and little black shirts and pants and boots, so you can look all dark and broody and moody. You giggled and glanced over at him as he grumbled, but failed to stifle a small grin. Yep, he was definitely into that kind of clothing. You grabbed the little packages, getting him a coat, a pair of boots, and a black shirt and pants. Ugh, these little clothes were expensive. But he did need stuff to wear. Do you want other colors, too? You asked. Before you could answer, a store employee with a poppy biddy on his shoulder rounded the corner and approached you, calling out, "Excuse me, customer." Ah, crap. Maybe he was talking to someone else. Nope. You were the only one in this aisle. Great. Unwanted human interaction. And customer? Really? Though he did stop a healthy distance away. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask that you take that outside. He pointed at Bob, and the poppy crossed its arms, seemingly looked down its nasal bone at Bob. What? You stuttered, stunned and a bit confused. Why? Bob was silent as you met his eyes, and then looked back at Chip, you read on his name tag. Ass manager. Ha! That was probably supposed to mean assistant manager. What an unfortunate place to cut the name tag off to make everything fit. Haha, ass. No, don't laugh. He was still talking to you. I'm sorry, but edgies aren't allowed in our store. Frankly, you really shouldn't have one anymore. Don't you know they've been recalled? He chided you. Well, you tried to interject, but were interrupted. Also, one of our customers complained that your edgy almost attacked her baby blue just a few minutes ago. Again, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to take that thing outside. You are more than welcome to shop here, but you can't bring that edgy in with you. Chip placed his hands on his hips authoritatively, pointing you towards the door. Well, what were you supposed to do? That ass manager wasn't going to back down, and you really didn't want to make a scene, even if he was in the wrong. You set the pile of plastic packaging on the shelf closest to you and turned to make your way out of the store. Great. Seemed everyone in the store overheard the exchange and silently stared as you and Bob walked out. Oddly, Bob was being very quiet, surprisingly so. From what little interaction you had with Bob, you would have expected him to tell the guy to fuck off, or at least growl or something. But there was nothing. You glanced at him out of the corner of your eye, and he was tensely staring straight ahead, his sharp teeth clamped, and his perpetual grin almost a frown. He was no longer clutching your hair, and was crossing his arms. Was he upset? You really couldn't blame him. You okay? You asked him as soon as you were outside. Peachy, he snapped. Definitely upset, but he still needed clothes, and you were garbage at sewing. The next closest Biddy store was another 2 hours away at least, and there was no guarantee they would treat Bob any better. You were stuck. I could take you back to the apartment and come back out here, you started. You're going back in there? He cried. Bob, I have to. There's nowhere. You know what? Go. Go back in there. Don't worry about me. I'll just wait in the fucking car. Not like the heat will hurt me or anything. It's fine. Just great. Actually, don't bother walking me back there. I'll just go wait beside it. And with that, he leapt to the ground, wincing and clutching at his leg as he landed a little too hard. Oh man, he didn't have any shoes on. Wait! You went to pick him up. Are you okay? Do you want me to? Just leave me alone! His voice cracked as he slapped your hand away and started limping towards the car. Well, you understood him being upset, but he didn't have to lash out at you. Still, you stood and watched and made sure he made it back to the car safely. You really didn't want him to be crushed by traffic, even if he was being a little shit to you. He went to sit under your car behind a tire, out of sight. You squinted in his direction, clenching your jaw. Seemed you had messed up, again. And here you were just trying to help, again. You had been nothing but nice to him, but it seemed like no matter what you did, you just managed to piss him off. Why were you trying so hard? You usually didn't put this much effort into being nice to people, especially people you had just met. It always backfired. Eventually, you turned around, heading back inside the store. Ugh. Why did you even care that Bob was angry at you again? Why did you always care so friggin' much about others, even when they didn't care about you? This was why you didn't really have anyone that close to you in life. You always seemed to mess up somehow when it came to interacting with others. Considering where you came from, it was no big surprise. But you digressed. Focus. Save the negativity for the journal. At least you could do one thing right. You would get Bob some nice clothes, even if you had to dig into this week's food budget. Even if you didn't know why you were even bothering. Chapter 5. Sarcasm. Ugh, those little clothes were really expensive, and the people in the store were pretentious jerks. But you managed to get a nice jacket, boots, and a few shirts and shorts and pants. Alas, looked like you would be eating ramen for the next week. Hey, I'm back, you announced to your front driver's side tire. No response. A cold feeling of dread started to settle in your chest. Would he run away? Try to live on his own? He had been found outside before. What if he tried that again and got hurt? You got down on your hands and knees, a little desperate now, looking under your car and calling, Bob? Ah, shit, lower your volume. Bob startled and growled as he sat propped against the tire, rubbing at his eyes. Oh, thank goodness he was okay. Wait, again, why were you that worried? Also, was he sleeping? But his eyes looked a little wet. You reached out for him but hesitated, dropping your arm. He cut his eyes at you, but said nothing more, pushing himself to his foot. The ride back to the apartment was awkward. Much like the ride to the store, Bob was not speaking to you again, and you were trying to figure out what to say to him. Gah, this weekend was not going the way you had expected at all. When you got off work Friday, all you wanted to do was go home and write in your journal, read, and play video games. What you usually did on your days off. You certainly didn't intend on bringing a pet home, and then find out that he actually wasn't a pet at all. And then go out of your way to try to make him happy, and fail repeatedly. Why? Why did you even care? He was a moody little shit. You really should just dump him off at the nearest animal shelter. But no, you wouldn't. It wouldn't be right. Again, with him not being a pet. You glanced over as his little eyes darted away from you. He pretended not to notice you and stare through the windshield. You sighed. In a way, he kind of reminded you of how you used to be. You were starting to realize you had probably been resigned to the fact that you had a new roommate the minute he sat on your chest and called you an asshole. Ha! What was wrong with you? And besides all that, would he even want to live with you? He didn't seem to have anywhere else to go. As soon as you opened the car door, Bob brushed past you and went to stand in front of the apartment door with his back turned. Then, as soon as you opened the apartment door, he made a beeline for your bedroom and went to hide or sulk or whatever under your bed. Fine. That was fine. You took a deep breath and let it out, still not getting angry. You carefully cut the clothes out of their plastic packaging. Why did everything have to be so difficult? Why did you just seem to do everything wrong when it came to Bob? Ugh, why did plastic packaging always have to be so nearly indestructible? After finally freeing all the little clothes, you folded them all into a neat little pile, setting the boots on top. It was really awkward folding such tiny clothes, but you managed. Maybe you should wash them first? But nah, it wasn't like they smelled bad or anything, besides maybe the faint plastic smell of the packaging. Carefully balancing the little pile of clothes in one hand, you grabbed a granola bar and a juice box. Yeah, a juice box. Totally adult beverage. With the other, and made your way back to your bedroom. You kneeled so you could lean down and peek under the bed. As expected, Bob was under there, hunched over, hugging his one good knee to his chest with his back to you. You sighed for probably the millionth time that day. So much breath wasted. You don't have to talk to me, but I'm putting the clothes I got you and something to eat right here just in case. Oh, almost forgot. You rushed off to the kitchen and filled a small bowl with warm water, grabbed a washcloth, and returned to the side of the bed, kneeling down again. And here's some stuff in case you want to bathe or whatever. I'm sure your feet are dirty. You waited to see if he would even acknowledge you. Nope. Your eye twitched in irritation. Yeah, seriously, no need for thanks or anything. Your cold shoulder and lack of any kind of response are all the thanks I need. Still nothing. Well, whatever, you tried. You were done trying now. Time to salvage what was left of your Saturday and do something fun. Bob could just sulk on his own. You weren't but an hour or so into your latest first-person shooter when you heard the sound of something shattering in your room. What the... right, the bowl. Made of ceramic. Oops. Deep breath. At that rate, you would probably be out of breakable dishes by the end of the week. They were cheap thrift store finds anyway, like most of the stuff in your apartment. Definitely not worth getting worked up over. Shrugging your shoulders and cracking your neck, you continued mowing down your opponents with virtual bullets. Much later that night, you went back to your room to find Bob had cleaned up the shards and water from the broken bowl. Also, he had eaten part of the granola bar, drank some of the juice, and was curled up in the hamster cage, wearing one of the pairs of black shorts rolled up to accommodate the leg bandage, and a black shirt you had given him. If the even breathing was any indication, he was sound asleep. Odd he'd decided to sleep in the apparently dead hamster-smelling cage, but whatever. Guess he figured he had nowhere else to sleep? You should probably correct that in the morning. You yet again woke up the next morning to find little glowing red eyes staring at you, but this time Bob was sitting on the side of the bed. "Thank you," he said, as he noticed you had woken up. Huh? You yawned as you rubbed the sleep out of your eyes. "I said thank you. Been doing some thinking and, I don't think I've ever said it." "Yeah, sure. You're welcome, Bob. Do you want some breakfast?" Well, seemed like you all were on speaking terms again. "Yes, but that's not why I said what I did. I guess I'm not really used to this." He motioned between you and himself, as if that were supposed to make sense. "And frankly, look, I'll just out and say it. No one's ever really been nice to me before, and it's kind of weird. I know today you're probably planning on taking me to some animal shelter, and I'm gonna try to convince you not to. I know what happens to me if I go there. You said you don't want to be my owner, and that's fine. I get it. But maybe you could just let me go outside? Heh, would be my best chance, I guess. I'm kind of confused why you keep being nice to me and why you got me so many clothes if you're just gonna send me away anyway. But I do owe you thanks for doing all that and even letting me stay in the first place." You blinked at him. "You think I'm gonna send you away?" Bob seemed like he would say something but stopped, squinting up at you. He looked even more confused, tilting his head to the side as he studied your face, seemingly trying to figure out your meaning. Like he really did think you were sending him away. You racked your brain trying to think about why he would think that. Dr. Rivera and you had discussed before about dropping Bob off at a shelter, but that was before you knew. And you hadn't done that and weren't going to do that. Why would Bob think that? You certainly didn't remember saying you didn't want him. Wait. Oh, crap. Yeah. On second thought, maybe you kinda had. Yesterday, when he had looked so hurt and then blew up at you, it had little to do with you not understanding about biddies. It was because you said you weren't his owner. You weren't, though. It wasn't right to own another person, but that didn't mean you didn't want him around. Had you even told him or hinted that you were going to ask him if he wanted to stay with you? No, you hadn't. Ugh, you felt like an ass. No wonder he had been so upset. God, he thought you were going to take him to some shelter, which would probably return him to the company where he came from. Then the company would... Wait, what usually happened to recalled items? They got destroyed, didn't they? Was that what they were doing to the recalled edgies? Just killing them? God, that was entirely possible. And Bob wasn't stupid, he knew. And here he sat thanking you for showing him just a little bit of kindness, even if he thought you didn't care about him. And he was seriously just politely asking that you reconsider sending him to certain death, to instead send him to a less certain death. Bob kept watching you, his confusion growing to concern as you probably made some horrible face, disgusted it had taken you this long to figure stuff out. Poor Bob. You of all people knew what it was like to have no place to go, to be unwanted. No, you couldn't let him think that. You had to spell things out clearly, since you both had been misunderstanding so much. Even if you did have to talk about feelings and junk. Ugh. Taking a deep breath to ground yourself, you got up out of bed and kneeled down in front of Bob so you could be eye to eye. His eye sockets widened and his glowing pupils constricted as he looked at you uncertainly. "I'm not sending you away," you said. "You can stay here as long as you want to. But when I said I'm not your owner, I meant it. But just not in the way you thought. You are not a pet. You are a person. A small, moody, skeletal person, but a person nonetheless. So, if you live here with me, it will be as a roommate. An equal, not a pet. I want you to stay." And oddly enough, you realized you meant it. You did want him to stay. This wasn't just out of pity or some mess. You genuinely might have been starting to grow attached to the little jerk. "You want me to stay?" he nearly whispered, the little lights of his eyes growing brighter and larger. You swallowed. "Ah, don't be a softy. Enough of the feelings mess. Walls back up. Play it off." "Pfft, sure, why not? Not like you take up much space. Plus, you seem to have a knack for keeping annoying people from getting too close while we're out, so bonus. That is, if you want to stay." Bob looked away, hastily wiping at one of his eyes as he mumbled, Fine. Okay. Whatever. I guess I can crash here for a while. Yeah." You smiled, standing and offering out your hand nonchalantly. "Cool. So now that that's settled, want to keep me company while I cook us up some eggs?" He smiled, a genuine smile, and eagerly reached out to hop up into your hand. And he was feeling overly warm again. Weird. The rest of the morning was spent cooking, eating breakfast, and not talking about anything in particular. Seemed you all had made some headway in understanding each other, at least a little. That afternoon, figuring since you all were going to be roommates, you showed him how to use the TV and log on to the internet. Seemed he could type as well as read. Not very fast, but impressive considering how small he was. Bob really was very smart. It was crazy how quickly he learned things, only having to be shown once. Later that evening, you all went to the grocery store, and Bob sat dutifully perched on your shoulder, growling at anyone he thought was getting too close. The whole thing was hilarious, as people kept startling and moving away, and you were trying desperately not to laugh. God, you really shouldn't have encouraged that. What if you both got kicked out of another store? Though, admittedly, it was kind of nice not having people bump into you as you shopped. It was also kind of nice not shopping alone, too, you guessed. He was wearing the black coat, shirt, shorts, and boots you had gotten him, despite the warm summer weather. Truly, he was looking like the moody little edgy edgelord he wanted to be, save for the bright pink bandaging on his leg. But you didn't dare tease him about it. You didn't want him tearing it off. Gah, your food budget for the week had been kinda shot, and now you had another mouth to feed. Not that he ate a whole heck of a lot. Maybe more than you would think for his size, but not a lot. Still, you loaded up your cart with ramen, dried beans, rice, some cheap frozen veggies, and mustard, for Bob. You'd have to skip on things like meat, cheese, and granola bars this week. Oh well. Out of the corner of your eye, you could see Bob frowning down at your meager selections, though he didn't say anything. It was dark out by the time you pulled up to your apartment. Per usual, you made a beeline to your door, avoiding the attention of your neighbor who was yelling at his wife through the door. After putting away the groceries, you returned to the den to find Bob had turned on the news. They were doing a report on the recent biddy craze. Well, at least among the people who could afford them, at $10,000 each. Sheesh, they really were expensive. You sat down next to Bob, who was picking at his bandage. Bob grumbled at you as you flicked his hand away from his leg. Now we're gonna do it as ridiculous over the top as we can. Alright, here we go.
Welcome back to the 4 o'clock news. I'm Gwen. This is Dale, trying to read this for the 5th time in a row. Our top story today. Dale tries to voice act with absolutely no training. And speaking of biddies, the anchorwoman continued, last month, a voluntary recall was issued for the edgy brand of the biddy line after one bit a child. Utagen compensated the family and issued a public apology stating that the edgy biddies had previously unforeseen personality disorders. They promised that the edgy line of the biddies will be discontinued. Consumers are encouraged to return the edgies or their microchip to their place of purchase or to the nearest Utagen Corporation location for a full refund. When returning, paperwork must...
You changed the channel to put on some cartoons as you noticed Bob looking upset. Cartoons always cheered you up. Though, yeah, he wasn't looking all that cheered up. Who could blame him? That anchorwoman was talking about him like his people were just some disposable things. And unwanted things at that. It wasn't right. But what could you possibly say to make any of this better? Bob just sat there, kind of staring off, not even watching TV. You shut off the TV. Bob continued to stare at the blank screen. Well, you should probably say something. Maybe get him to talk about it. Want to talk about it? You tried. He grimaced, then stared down at his feet, seemingly studying his boots. Nah. All right, he didn't want to talk about it. But he was looking anxious and depressed, and you wanted to say something. Just so you know, I'm not selling you, or whatever, back to that company. Why? He turned his head so he could look up at you with his dim eyelights. Ah, of course he would wonder. He probably noticed that you weren't the wealthiest person in the world. You looked down at him, debating on your answer. Would he really believe you weren't planning on selling him? Did he really have any reason to have faith in anyone? Because, you gave him your most serious expression, I'm holding out for more money. You're such a pain in the ass, you've got to be worth at least double that. He stared blankly at you for a few seconds. Then he completely lost it, literally falling over laughing. Oh wow, his actual laugh was significantly higher pitched than his talking voice. Oh my god! He gasped between his fits of giggles. You really are the most tactless person I've ever met. You're the worst! You laughed too, as he tried to get a hold of himself. This was the first time you had actually heard him laugh since you brought him home. You were glad you could cheer him up, if even just a little. And bonus, he appreciated your horrible sarcastic humor. Seems you all had something else in common.
My throat hurts 'cause Bob's voice is rough. This is the song of me singing about recording him, and it's tough. I don't think that I'm doing a particularly good job, but this is just practice, so it's okay if I'm a slob.
Chapter 6. Veterinary Hospital. Deciding that Bob really shouldn't sleep in the dead hamster cage anymore, you got out your fleece blanket to make him a bed on the couch. For some crazy unknown reason, he tried to fight you, saying the cage was fine. You insisted on the blanket, and eventually he caved. Well, at least he sat grumbling beside the blanket with his arms folded, but no longer outright arguing. It's temporary. Maybe we can get a box or something and make you your own room eventually? You reasoned. Or I could stay under your bed. It's roomy and dark. No. Not exactly keen on the idea of having a literal skeleton sleep under my bed, for one thing. Talk about monsters under the bed. Also, total lack of privacy. Seriously? The other night you just changed your clothes right in front of me while I was on the dresser. Not to mention that you brought me here while I was clothed in nothing but a towel. And now you're worried about privacy? You blushed, stuttering. Well, that was because how was I supposed to know? I didn't know you were... What? Halfway intelligent? Able to talk? So if I were like a dog or cat, privacy wouldn't be an issue? I'm sure there are some smart cats and dogs out there too. Ugh, you're weird. Humans are weird. Whatever. I really don't know why you're insisting on staying under... Your cell phone pinged. That familiar ping you had reserved for that person in particular. Son of a bitch, what the hell did he want now? You okay? That tone, was that your phone? His irritation was replaced with worry, as you were probably making a horrible face. None of your business! Good night! You snapped, and he flinched as you whirled around, storming off to your room and slamming the door. Taking a deep breath, you fished your phone out of your pocket, and sure enough, your father had sent you a text. Of course, just a simple message saying he missed you and asking how you had been, where you had moved now since you weren't at your old apartment. God, you had moved over a year ago. If your father was contacting you now, it could only mean one thing. He would try to guilt you into giving him money. Again. But no, you weren't going to let that happen. This time you wouldn't even answer his text. Instead, you pulled your worn journal out from the nightstand drawer and started writing like you always did when you were feeling bad. Writing things down helped you get out all of your negative feelings without blowing up at some poor unsuspecting person or crying or doing something else unsightly. You could just pour all of the bad things about yourself away in your journal and then close it up and forget about it. Lock it away where no one else could see it. Cathartic and a hell of a lot cheaper than therapy. The shrill sound of your phone alarm woke you up at 6 a.m. sharp. You slapped at it angrily, finally fumbling with it and shutting it off. Ugh. Another day, another dollar. But maybe you could sleep just 5 more minutes? Wait, no. You had to get up. Had you even told Bob you had work all day today? What would he do while you were gone? You'd have to make sure he had food and water. In non-breakable dishes. And, geez, you had snapped at him just before going to bed and had even closed your door. Which, admittedly, it was kind of nice not to wake up to being stared at after the last 2 mornings. But still, you'd have to do some damage control. But later. After showering and changing into your scrubs. Ah, scrubs. The ever-unflattering pajamas that sometimes carry the not-so-faint scents of animals and their various bodily fluids. Your life was glamorous. Luckily, your one tiny bathroom was attached to your room, so you could do your morning routine without disturbing your new roommate. After getting ready, as quietly as possible, since your room led straight to the den, you carefully opened the door so you wouldn't wake up Bob if he was sleeping. Turned out he was, propped up against your door. He fell in as soon as you opened the door, and his arms shot out to stop himself from falling. Morning, Tiny. He looked up and gave you a sheepish sort of grimace while rubbing the back of his skull. Is there a reason you were sleeping there when you had a perfectly good blanket on the couch? You looked down at him, maybe feeling a little bit bad. Again, don't tell me how to live my life, he supplied weakly. You sighed, giving up. At least he didn't seem upset after the previous night, so you decided not to even bring it up, lest he ask about the text. You didn't even want to go there. Fair enough. Anyway, I've got to go to work. He pushed himself up, hobbling on his bad leg and dusting off his shorts. Okay, cool. Guess I could get this bandage changed. Itches like crazy. But not by that doctor. And then I could just hang out and keep you company. Wait, whoa, no. You're staying here. We get way too busy for you to just hang out with me. Plus, we have many glass jars and containers of injectables on the shelves. You'll break something. Not if I sit on your shoulder, I won't. You can't just sit on my shoulder. I literally wrestle dogs and cats as a good chunk of my job. You'd get hurt. Well, what about my itchy bandage? He leaned over and dug at it with his sharp little finger bones to punctuate his point. Stop messing with that. I'll bring the stuff home and help you change it after work. I can't babysit you today. Mondays are always hectic. You don't have to babysit me. Just bring me in that damn stinky hamster cage. I won't try to escape. I promise. He was getting rather insistent. Bob, you'll be fine. I'm going to leave you some food and water and juice, whatever you want. You've got the TV, you've got the internet. Seriously, you'll be fine. You stepped over him to start getting food and stuff out. He hopped after you, clutching at your pant leg when you stopped at the fridge. You're really gonna make me beg, aren't you? Fine. Please. Please take me with you. Bob, why? He cut you off. Please, don't leave me here alone. He stared up at you intently, his hands clasped on your pant leg. Wow, he was really serious. He would rather spend hours locked in a cage at the vet hospital than spend all day home alone? Was he afraid to be left alone? Why? But you didn't ask him. After all of the events over the weekend, poor guy had suffered enough blows to his pride. All right, you sighed, pinching the bridge of your nose. But if you break even one thing, we'll both be out of a home. Because I'll get fired. I won't. He visibly relaxed, grinning. And no cursing out the doctor or my coworkers or any of the clients. I won't. Thank you. You sighed again, resignedly leaning down and offering your hand so he could climb up and you could place him on your shoulder. You made peanut butter sandwiches for lunch, grabbed an apple, filled your water bottle, and got the last of the granola bars for breakfast. Then you grabbed your bag, heading for the front door. Not gonna bring the cage? Bob asked from your shoulder. Nah. Worst comes to worst, you can hang out in one of the kennels. You closed and locked the front door, heading for your car. Kennel? Like a big cage, but stacked for dogs and cats. You'll see. Ugh, it was already starting to get hot and humid out. It would probably rain later. You could practically feel your hair starting to frizz and your scrubs sticking to you. Today would be a great day to work. Inside. In the AC. Getting into the car and leaning over, you got Bob close enough to hop off your shoulder and take his usual position on the dashboard. As you all drove, you opened 2 granola bars, handing one to Bob and munching on the other. It amazed you the amount of food he could eat. Like he could easily polish off a whole granola bar in one go if he tried, small as he was. Luckily, the traffic for the morning commute was light. You managed to get to work early, though per usual, Gary had beaten you there. Well, Gary and Dr. Rivera probably. They usually commuted together on Mondays. Remember, be nice, you reminded Bob. Yeah, I know, and no breaking stuff. He assured you as he hopped over to your shoulder, being careful not to bump his leg. Odd, you noticed he didn't feel overly warm like usual. You shrugged it off as bitty weirdness. Gary was double-checking the till and credit card receipts as you opened the door. Morning, Gary, you greeted your manager. Yeah, Gary insisted you call him by his first name. It was kind of weird for you at first, not calling your boss Mr., but you got used to it quickly enough. Gary was tall and lanky with sharp cheekbones, steel gray eyes, and black hair with gray flecks. If one didn't know better, he looked somewhat intimidating. That is, until he opened his mouth and spoke. Good morning, sunshine, Gary sang happily at you. Oh, he said as he noticed Bob. Miguel told me you took one of those creatures home with you for the weekend. I thought you weren't going to keep... Why is it not in a cage or carrier? Morning. Gary, meet Bob. Bob, Gary. Gary's the manager of this fine establishment. Bob is not a pet. He's my new roommate. You idly wondered how many times you would have to explain the situation to others. Oh, well, aren't you just the cutest? Gary exclaimed, getting up so he could get a closer look. Okay, Bob said, glancing over at you uncertainly as he leaned away from Gary's face. Oh, how wonderful! He can talk! And it almost sounds like he understands what I'm saying. Gary clapped his hands excitedly. Yep, he does. Is Dr. Rivera here? You asked, reaching up to flick Bob's good foot to cut off the growl he was starting. Indeed he is! Miguel's in his office. Oh, he'll be so tickled you decided to keep... Bob, was it? Simply delighted. You turned on the computers and started the wake-up cycle on the blood machines on your way to the doctor's office. Bob was fidgeting on your shoulder as you all approached. He was probably afraid after last time, but whatever. He was the one who insisted on coming to work with you. He'd live. Dr. Rivera was looking over blood work results sent to the lab from the previous day as you knocked on the doorframe. He raised one of his eyebrows as he noticed Bob sitting on your shoulder. Well, I take it plans have changed. Foster fail?
Actually, turns out Bob's not a pet, and he needed a place to stay, so he'll be staying with me for the time being. I figured you all should maybe meet again under better circumstances. Bob, Dr. Rivera. Dr. Rivera? Bob, you introduced. Bob and Dr. Rivera just stared each other down. Bob seemed tense, and you could feel as he tightened his grip on your hair and shoulder.
Bob, I see. Whatever you say,
Dr. Rivera said, taking off his glasses to clean them.
Is there a reason you brought him to work, then? And why he's not in a carrier?
You glanced at Bob, who was frowning at the doctor and still not saying anything. No one was going to believe he wasn't a pet if he kept being all quiet. He didn't want to stay home alone. He promised he'd be nice and stay out of the way. Right? You said, again attempting to get him to talk. Bob just grunted.
Talking fail. Just make sure Bob doesn't bite anyone or get into anything, Dr. Rivera said, putting his glasses back on. I really don't feel like chasing him down. Speaking of chasing, how's his leg doing?
You looked at Bob to see if he'd answer the question. He didn't. You sighed.
He says it itches. He says? I see. Have you checked to make sure there's no swelling or infection around his feet or toes?
Dr. Rivera asked. Ah, crap, you hadn't been checking that. And you knew better. Though, could bones really swell? They could get infected, though. He was just made of bones, right? You glanced at Bob, hoping he would provide some insight. He just kept watching the doctor warily, saying nothing.
Well, we've got a little while before our first appointment. Dr. Rivera was rolling back his chair to get up. Let me get the bandage stuff and I can... No!
Bob finally spoke up, startling and cutting off Dr. Rivera's train of thought.
The leg's fine after all. Stay the hell away from me, you fucking... Bob!
You admonished, and he cringed, anxiousness and guilt flashing across his face as you scowled at him. Dr. Rivera had paused, halfway out of his chair, looking rather surprised. After a few seconds, he settled on standing and approaching.
Huh, so he can speak. Interesting.
Dr. Rivera was studying Bob intently. Bob was scooting closer to your neck, and you could feel him starting to tremble as he let out a quiet growl. All right, you said, taking pity on Bob and breaking the doctor's intense concentration. I'll change his bandage on my own. It'll be good practice for me anyway. I could show you afterwards?
Fair enough,
Dr. Rivera said, relenting and backing off a little, getting the hint.
Sorry you're so afraid of me, he addressed Bob. I'm not.
Bob grunted and you side-glanced at him. It looked like he wanted to say more, but held back whatever it was. Dr. Rivera laughed.
He really does understand speech, doesn't he? Truly fascinating. And here I thought my future tech was just going a little bit crazy.
Gee, thanks for the vote of confidence, Doc, you groaned, and then had to flick Bob's foot again to stop his growling. You had about 15 minutes before the first appointment started. Mary had just arrived, as you could hear from Gary's enthusiastic, "Good morning," and questions about how Mary's daughter was. Bob was watching as you gathered all of the bandaging material and set it on the back exam table. Sure you're going to be okay with this? You asked as you leaned down so Bob could slide off your shoulder onto the table.
Yeah, just keep that doctor away from me. I don't like him,
he grumbled as he sat down facing you so you could reach his bandage.
Be careful, okay?
He added as he gingerly removed the boot from the foot of his bad leg. Oh, should I be careful? And here I was planning on just tearing the bandage off your leg as non-gently as possible. You rolled your eyes at him as he narrowed his eyes at you. And be nice to Dr. Rivera. I've worked with him for a long time. He's not a bad guy. You gently started to cut away the bandage with your tiny bandage scissors, noting that his toes looked clean, and like normal foot bones, you supposed. Just tell me if any of this hurts.
Okay, just so... Ow! He screamed, making you nearly drop the scissors.
Shit! I'm sorry! Are you... You started to say, but Bob was grinning widely.
Your face!
He nearly doubled over laughing, clutching his ribs and kicking his good leg. You glared at him. You moody little shit! Don't joke around like that when I have sharp things in my hand or I'll cut your damn foot off! You finished cutting the bandage. The tibia looked intact and clear of infection.
Miraculously, the bone hadn't shifted and appeared to be on its way to healing, considering he'd been running and jumping around on it all the time. You probably should have encouraged him to keep off of it.
Heh, whatever. Cut it off. I'll just grow another one.
You paused in your assessment, meeting his bright little eyelights. You can grow limbs back? Bob gave you a serious look and nodded sagely, and then burst out laughing again.
No, I can't! Oh my god, you're so gullible!
How the hell am I supposed to know about how your freakish, moody mutant self works?
Ugh, change your own bandage.
You pushed the bandaging material at him, starting to turn like you were going to leave.
Ah, no, Tiny, wait. Why do you keep calling me moody? I'm just joking around with you. Be nice.
He went to stand, but winced, his leg no longer supported by the splint. Fine, sit down, you're going to make your break worse. You're moody because you keep varying between being quietly grouchy and then all cheerful at, like, the drop of a hat. And I don't see why I always have to be nice to you. You're not nice at all. Hold still. You flicked his hands away from scratching at his bad leg as you started to wrap it.
Yeah, right, you're nice. The oh-so-nice person who threatened to sell me and cut my foot off.
He grinned up at you again as you tried not to smile. It would just encourage him. Suddenly, both you and Bob noticed how quiet the office had become. You looked up and, yep. Great. Mary was leaning on the doorway with an eyebrow raised, staring at you and Bob. Gary had a hand up to his mouth and was giggling over Mary's shoulder. Dr. Rivera had stepped out of his office and was staring at the two of you with his brow furrowed. Bob seemed to shrink into himself as he folded his arms over his chest.
Oh my! He's like a tiny, snarkier version of our future tech. How adorable!
Gary whisper-squeaked. You sighed as you finished wrapping Bob's leg and helped him up to your shoulder. Ha ha, Gary, you said sarcastically. All right, show's over. You set Bob up in one of the kennels with a blanket, your phone, so he could surf the web, and one of the random animal magazines they had. He was going to be so bored, but that was his fault. You offered to leave him home. And yeah, he didn't seem happy about having to spend the day in the kennel, but didn't say anything. The day seemed to fly by, mostly annual vaccines and checkups, typical seasonal allergies, and a dachshund with a hurt neck. You barely had time to eat your apple and sandwich and give Bob his half of apple and sandwich. Poor Bob looked so bored. But he was keeping true to his promise of being good and not breaking stuff or being rude to anyone. Not that he really said anything to anyone after the bandage incident earlier. Maybe he was shy? Speaking of quiet, Dr. Rivera was being uncharacteristically quiet between appointments, too, and kept giving you these weird, worried glances. And he was totally ignoring your occasional snarkastic comments. You couldn't get him to curse even once. There was finally a little gap in between appointments at the end of the evening where you could corner Dr. Rivera in his office and find out what was up with him. Hey, Doc, you said, knocking on the door frame as he was finally getting around to eating a little lunch. Dinner? While looking up something on the information network. Everything okay?
Oh, everything's fine.
He didn't look up from what he was reading. Okay, except I don't believe you. What's with the quietness and weird looks? Seriously, what did I do now? Dr. Rivera sighed and pulled off his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose.
Can't I just get a little break to eat my lunch in peace?
I didn't get a lunch break. I don't see why you should get one. Tell me what's up.
All right, very well. It's that not pet Bitty of yours. It isn't right. Something like him should never have been created.
Dr. Rivera looked genuinely disturbed. That's what's been bothering him? What the hell? What if Bob overheard him say that? You folded your arms, annoyed. Well, he was created, and he does exist. I don't think it's right to deny him his life, just because you don't think he's right or whatever.
He's technically not alive. Living things have certain characteristics they're supposed to meet that he doesn't. This is why Eudigen can treat biddies like products instead of living things. This whole idea of soul energy was theoretical science until just recently. Humans shouldn't tamper with such things. I don't know what he is, but he isn't right. You need to be careful.
Dr. Rivera was looking at you seriously, worry creasing his brow as he cleaned his glasses. a nervous habit of his. You took a few deep breaths before you spoke, your own habit that prevented you from blurting out things in anger. Dr. Rivera, you know I respect the hell out of you, but you and I differ greatly on this particular topic. I think it's best we don't discuss it further and that you don't ever bring up any of this in front of Bob. You just stared at each other calmly for a few seconds, before Dr. Rivera let out another sigh and replaced his glasses. Do me a favor and set up the ultrasound. We need to get urine on our last patient of the night, and as you know, Gigi tends to pee when she gets nervous. Just walk her straight to the back when she gets here. Well, seemed the topic was dropped then. He knew you well enough to know when not to push you on certain things. Of course, after settling everything up, Gigi never showed up. Per usual, Mary left early to pick up her kid, and you went to man the front desk the last half hour of the evening. Well, at least you had time to finish all the closing duties. And yay for getting off on time! Bob had accompanied you while you swept and mopped and was currently on the floor looking through the brochures stacked behind the reception desk. 10 minutes before closing, you groaned as a car pulled up and a man got out heading to the front door. Ugh, please, just be coming to pick up some medication. You recognized that man. Then it dawned on you why. You swallowed your dread, calmly saying, Bob, get under the desk, don't say anything. Chapter 7. Memories. Bob, get under the desk. Don't say anything. Huh? Why? He looked up at you, holding a brochure for flea prevention in his hands. Just do it! You hissed as the door opened, and you forced a smile at the man approaching. Bob, catching your tone, scooted out of sight under the desk by your feet. Hello, you chirped. How can I help you this evening? The scruffy-looking man approached and leaned on the counter in front of you. He had a wicked-looking scab on his left hand. Yeah, he said, clearing his throat. I was here on Friday. I left, my pet here by accident. I was coming to get it back. Your eye twitched, but you struggled to maintain your professionally cheerful persona. I'm sorry, sir, but you surrendered him to us and left. Well, I wouldn't say surrender. Look, I didn't know it was worth money. I saw a special on it on TV last night, so I'd really like to get that edgy bitty back. I'm sorry, sir, I'm afraid he was brought to a shelter. Not technically a lie. You were sheltering him, weren't you? He narrowed his eyes at you, leaning closer as you leaned back. Brought to a shelter, huh? Don't think I believe you. Reckon you sold it off yourself and kept the money. Awful selfish of you. You know, I got a family that could really use that money. The way I see it, you stole from me and my kids, and I ain't leaving until I get what's mine. He was raising his voice as he spoke. Shit, you sucked at confrontations, but there was no way you were handing Bob over to him. You heard a small growl and had to tap Bob with your foot. Shit, that man would hear him. But no, luckily seemed the man hadn't heard the growl. I'm sorry, sir, but you surrendered him and I can't give him back, you repeated, squaring your shoulders. Listen here, you little Can I help you, sir? Gary said, interrupting the man's tirade as he emerged from his office. Oh, thank God, Gary to the rescue. He was walking up behind you, frowning down at the man in front of you. Gary really could be intimidating when he wanted to be. Your receptionist stole my pet on Friday and sold him, and I want my money, he barked, red-faced and motioning angrily at you. Gary looked down at you as you looked up at him. Did you steal this man's pet and sell it? No, sir. This gentleman left an edgy bitty in a jar on the desk on Friday and then left. You could feel Bob gripping your scrub pant leg under the table. Gary looked back down at the man sternly. Well, sir, it sounds like your accusation of my employee is false. If you don't have any further business here, please leave. The man balked and opened his mouth like he was going to argue when you heard Dr. Rivera speak up from the back hallway. Sir, I believe my manager has asked you to leave. Please do so. The man glared icily at all of you and stormed out, slamming the front door behind him. You let out a long breath, rubbing your face. Gary put an arm around you, hugging you to his side. Don't worry, Pumpkin. We've got your back.
I won't let entitled little dickwaffles like that threaten my hospital family. He looked back at Dr. Rivera, smiling. As soon as the dickwaffles headlights turned out of the parking lot, you reached down and scooped Bob into your hands to place him on your shoulder. He patted your shoulder briefly and looked away guiltily as you glanced at him. Even so, Dr. Rivera said as he leaned against the wall, I think it's best if from now on Bob stays at home. It would be safer for both you and him. You frowned, but said nothing. The doc was probably right. It wasn't fair, but who knows what would happen if that man came back, or some other shady client saw Bob at the hospital. Bob just looked down dejectedly and said nothing. Bob was quiet on the ride home, staring through the front windshield as it started raining. Giant, intermittent splatters that your wipers smeared as you pulled out of the hospital parking lot. Ugh, you really needed to get new wiper blades. You squinted at the hazy shapes of headlights and taillights as you drove. Seemed Bob was lost in thought as he just stared at the rain hitting the windshield, his bone brow furrowed, hugging his good knee to his chest. He flinched each time there was a flash of lightning. Poor Bob. The whole world viewed him as property, and defective property at that. You couldn't even imagine what that was like. You know, you broke the silence as you all approached the apartment. Since you've been riding up there, I'm getting tiny little butt prints all over my dashboard. Bob actually smirked at that, the corners of his mouth stretching up a little. Ha! At least you could make him smile. Wasn't me. I don't have a butt. Fine, you rolled your eyes. Tiny, creepy skeleton prints from your bony self. Well, it wouldn't be an issue if you actually cleaned your dashboard once in a while. I've been meaning to tell you, your car's gross. You're gross, you shot back. Clever comeback for the win. You're the grossest, Bob half-heartedly argued back. He continued to stare through the windshield as you pulled into the parking spot in front of the apartment. Ha, all right, enough with the mushy banter bullshit. Let's get inside before it starts raining any harder. Ah, crap. Left my umbrella in the apartment. You're splint. Could I carry you in my scrub pocket? Bob grinned. Enough with the mushy bullshit. He changed his voice in a sad attempt to imitate you. You say in the same breath you offer to shelter me from the rain. You totally fail at being a jerk. Ugh, says the little wannabe edgelord who gets all doe-eyed every time I say something nice to him. You held out your hand to him. He scoffed, but climbed up anyway. Well, at least your plan worked and Bob stayed dry. You, on the other hand, were soaked. Time to change into some dry pajamas. The comfy cat-patterned ones. Ah, yeah. Bob sat on the couch, turning on the TV and shooting nervous glances to the window now and again as you kicked off your shoes by the coffee table. He jumped a little when your shoe hit the table and tried to play it off like he was reaching up to scratch his chin. Maybe he hadn't ever seen rain before? You mentally shrugged it off as you made your way to your room. As you changed out of your wet dog-smelling scrubs, you saw a flash and heard the distant sound of thunder. Last thunderstorm had only been a few days ago. Seemed the summer thunderstorm season was off to a strong start. Not that you hated thunderstorms. Au contraire, you loved them. Hearing the rain pound against the windows, seeing the flashes of light followed by the loud crackle, it reminded you that humans couldn't control everything, that nature could still assert itself and there wasn't a damn thing anyone could do to stop it. There was a loud boom and the power went out. Well, maybe nature could tone back the asserting just a little. You heard a cry and then what sounded like clattering and cursing coming from the den. What the hell? Bob's point of view. It's just a storm. Bob tried to focus on whatever was playing on TV. Just a storm. He knew what a storm was. Hell, the first storm he had ever experienced, he had been outside in it. But at that time... No, he didn't want to think about that time. He turned up the volume, trying to focus on whatever mindless show was on, but each crack of thunder had him glancing at the windows. He couldn't help it. The rumble and flashes of lights, they reminded him of those machines, of where he'd end up eventually, if... No, that wouldn't happen. Tiny wouldn't do that. You said you wanted him around.
Hell, you didn't even make a big deal of it when he had been scared to be left alone. Scratch that. Not scared. He had strongly preferred not to be left alone. That's it. Not like he was a coward or anything. Geez, the storm was getting rough out there. What was taking you so long? Yeah, okay, so maybe he didn't want to be alone right now. Maybe you were good company. Maybe you were growing on him or something. But wouldn't you eventually get sick of him? You clearly didn't see him as a pet. What could he even do for you? What was his purpose in staying with you? You were smart, funny, independent, and Bob had been nothing but a burden thus far. Why did you even need him around? You didn't. The rain picked up, and the sound of thunder followed the flashes of lightning more closely. He shuddered, and he couldn't stop the memories from flooding back. Screams, the smell of ozone, dust, so much dust, being trapped. A flash of light and everything went dark. No, he wouldn't go back to that place. He was running, ignoring the pain in his broken leg, then falling, something having snagged his good foot. Fuck! He was trapped! Again, he had to escape. He didn't want to die.